Gentlemen, we thank you very much for spending some time here to stop whatever it was that you were planning on doing to remember Peter Carnegie. What I've learned my name is Richard Rosen, Winnipeg's friendliest undertaker, and I've been invited to say a few words afterwards, but I'm just going to say one thing really quickly at the very beginning. Everybody's life is a book, and it's chapter upon chapter of high school and elementary school and skin knees and first bike rides and whatever it is. And every single one of you in this room has chapters of Peter in the way that you know him through the chapters of the pages that you worked with him or interacted with. And today, if you look through the little card, you're going to hear from grandchildren and some co-workers and some family friends and some other folks that are going to expand what you know. And when you leave here, we hope that you say, I'm going to miss my friend Peter, but I'm going to really miss him now even more because of the things that I've learned and the powerful impact that he's made on all of the lives that he's touched. So I now call upon Peter's son-in-law, Glenn Anderson, to carry on as Master of Ceremonies and to carry on with our time here together.
Good afternoon, everybody. On behalf of Peter's family, his wife Marlene of over 52 years, his son Sean, Sean's wife Jamie, their daughter Megan, Peter's wife Shannon, my wife, and my children, Hannah and Ella. Thank you for coming today. Very much appreciate it. Kind of overwhelmed by the number of faces I'm looking at there right now. But thank you for coming to celebrate Peter Carnegie's remarkable and impactful life. Or as many of you would have known Peter as, Pistol Pete, Petey. And if you're ever standing close enough to Peter and you ever heard the phrase Pistol Pete, you probably would have heard him finish the phrase saying, was sweet around the net. So that was Peter. So today we're going to reminisce. Hopefully we laugh a little bit too. That was important for Peter to laugh and enjoy. I think I've learned a lot over the last week, so we're going to learn a little bit more about Peter. And maybe we might shed a tear or two, I'm not too sure, but that's sort of how the day is going to go. So my name is Glenn Anderson, and as Peter always pointed out, I am his favorite son-in-law, his only son-in-law, but still his favorite. And over the last few months, he gave me a nickname, the big guy. So I'd walk into Riverview or wherever, and he'd just say, there's the big guy. So sort of embracing that new nickname now. Hopefully it's because of my height, not because of my girth. So the first time I met Peter was a very pivotal moment of my life. I had met his daughter Shannon while we were working, and we started to date a little bit. And it got to the point where it was time to meet the parents. And that's usually done over dinner and some awkward small chat and that sort of thing. But in my case, it was an interrogation. You see, I was a few years older than Shannon, just a few. I was going through a divorce. I already had a house that I was in the midst of losing, along with my car. I already had a young child. So I really don't know what Peter had a problem with, but whereas Shannon still lived at home, paid $100 rent to the family, and basically I walked in the house, and with great emphasis, as soon as I sat down, Peter let me know under no uncertain terms that I was not pumpkin worthy. Shannon was his princess and his little pumpkin. The discussion of that interrogation is not important. But what is important was that's when my and Peter's relationship started. That was ground zero of my relationship with Peter. And that's kind of what Peter did. He built those relationships. And it got to the point, that's where it started. And it culminated to hear me standing in front of you today, 23 years later, leading a celebration of Peter's life. So that's the kind of man that Peter was. And I want to share a note that my wife Shannon received from a very good friend of Peter and Marlene's, Patty. I'm sure Patty's out here somewhere. And Patty, I hope you don't mind me sharing the note. But in a few words, Patty seemed to sum up the feelings that we were feeling. And when Shannon read it at that time, she said, "This is exactly what I'm feeling." So I thought I'd just share what she wrote. She wrote, "Although we knew Peter had an unforgiving form of cancer, he did so well for so long. Despite this, it was still hard to believe he's gone when we heard the news. He always seemed to rally when we saw a difficulty, so it is a surprise that he actually will not be here in our lives anymore. Your dad will be so proud of how his family supported him and your mom throughout this journey. 80 years young, always." So thank you, Patty, for those very kind words, and it just was we received them at just the exact right time. And that's just one example of hundreds and hundreds of examples that demonstrates the impact that Peter had on those whose paths he crossed. Whether it was a friend, a co-worker, through business or pleasure, Peter built relationships. I just want to emphasize that Peter built relationships. Each of you in this room are here for your own reason, but one thing that I'm sure that we all have in common is that he took a time to connect with you on a level that drew you here today. His family is everything. His friends were cherished. He was fiercely loyal. I think we all know that he was fiercely loyal. He was always busy. Well, that's not true. He was either always busy or taking a nap. He was like an on-off switch. So he was one of the two, but he was always buzzing around. He was competitive and quick-tempered. And actually, a former co-worker of his, Bert Robinson, shared a story in the early 70s, I guess. Peter must have worked in a Bank of Montreal branch somewhere in downtown Winnipeg, and they'd walk to the main branch to have lunch. And I guess there must have been a staff lounge up on the top floor, and they could play snooker and finish off their lunch hour. So they had lunch and went up and were playing snooker. And it was, I guess, a very intense game of snooker, and Peter lost. So out of frustration, he threw the balls across the table as hard as he could. One ball bounced off the buffer and through the window. That faced poor Jermaine. So yes, he was competitive and quick-tempered, but he was also just as quick to laugh at himself. And he was also, I don't want to use the word cheap. It wasn't cheap. His family always had beautiful homes, went on fabulous vacations, always had the best of what they needed to have. But we'll say he was thrifty. And for those of you here that are old enough to remember Johnny Carson, when Johnny Carson would say Peter was thrifty, the audience would say, how thrifty was he? Well, Peter was so thrifty that when he was booking a family flight and found out that kids 2 years old or younger could fly for free, he asked Marlene to dress his then 3-year-old son Sean in a specific yellow outfit because it made him look younger. So today, along with two of his good friends, Bob Laidlaw and Norm Oakley, who's here, his favorite daughter-in-law, Jamie, and his 3 most favorite granddaughters, Hannah, Megan, and Ella, we are going to share some chapters of Peter's life. We can't tell all the stories. If we did, we'd have to schedule a pee break. But hopefully we share enough to do his remarkable life justice. So to kick things off, I am pleased to ask his sister-in-law, Mary Louise Zorniak, to start us off with a poem reading that we felt was appropriately sets the stage for this celebration. Now, I don't know if this was Peter's favorite poem. He may not even have a favorite poem, for all I know. But I do know that he was fond of this specific one. Mary Louise?
Good afternoon. I was honored by the Carnegie family to read this poem by Linda Ellis, and it's called The Dash. I read of a man who was invited to speak at the funeral of a friend. He referred to the dates on the tombstone from the beginning to the end. He noted that first came the date of birth and spoke of the following date with tears. But he said, what mattered most of all was the dash between those years. For that dash represents all the time he spent alive on earth, and now only those who loved him know what that little line was worth. For it matters not how much we own, the cars, the cash. What matters is how we live and love and how we spend our dash. So think about this long and hard. Are there things that you would like to change? For you never know how much time is left that can still be rearranged. To be less quick to anger and show appreciation more, and love the life and love the people in our lives like we've never loved before. If we treat each other with respect and more often wear a smile, remembering that that special dash might only last a little while. So, when your eulogy is being read, with your life's actions to rehash, would you be proud of the things they say about how you lived your dash?
Everything today is connected. And that poem, The Dash, and I want to thank you, Mary Louise, for such a beautiful reading of the poem. Thank you so much for agreeing to do that. That poem was a focus of my daughter Ella's school assignment one time. And one thing you need to know is Peter and Marlene, they'd after Peter retired, they'd summer at the cottage and they'd snowbird out in Florida. But in between, there's those shoulder weeks in between, they lived with us. So this is one of the moments where they were staying with us when Ella was doing that assignment. And Peter saw the assignment, and he was really taken by that particular poem. And of course, when Ella got a good grade on it, then he was really taken by that particular poem. He thought it was just, that's a wonderful poem. You're so brilliant, so smart. So we're here today to share the significance of that dash between the date September 18th, 1941, dash August 18th, 2022. One regret that I do have is now having had the opportunity to hear all the stories of who Peter was over the last week or so from his closest friends and his family, is that I never took the time to actually sit down with Peter and hear those stories from him, from the man himself. When they stayed with us, me and Peter spent countless hours at the kitchen table drinking our morning coffees together while our young women got their beauty sleep. We would sit there and drink our coffee, and he would ask me question after question after question. If the roles were reversed, he could stand up here and probably recite my life, no problem. And I just wish I had taken the time to ask more about his childhood, his career, as opposed to just what was going on that day. But I'm very happy to say that I've gotten to know Peter much more over the last few days, and we're here to share that with you. One of his childhood friends, Bob Laidlaw, who can't be here with us today, was kind enough to send me his favorite memory of Peter. And people, this is a good story. So I'm going to read it to you. This is what Bob wrote. He wrote, "Peter Carnegie was a friend of mine at the age of 9. Peter is more than a friend. He was a piece of my life. Peter, at the time of our meeting, was living with his granny on Chalmers Avenue in Elmwood here in Winnipeg. This was conveniently 1 block over from our residence. I was a sports fanatic. I played every sport I could arrange to get the equipment for. But my family's financial situation sometimes limited my access to this stuff, like golf. I wanted to play golf, but I couldn't afford the clubs. But then I was told that there's some kid chipping balls on the boulevard, from the boulevard to his front yard, and I thought, perfect. I'm going to go over and meet this kid. This kid's name was Pete, and the rest is history. Shortly thereafter, we decided that we were going to walk the 4 miles over to the North Kildonan Public Golf Course. We arrived there just before the sun came up, snuck through the fence on the 3rd hole, and played through to 18. After the game, we went in to pay, but the clubhouse was too crowded to pay our 75-cent green fee, so we just went on our way. We shared Pete's clubs, which actually was not allowed, but we'd found a badly beaten golf bag with 1 club in it, down by the river, so now I had a set of clubs. And I borrowed a couple of Pete's clubs too, because he only really used 2 clubs, the putter and the 3-wood. That day on our first game, Pete shot 108, and yours truly shot 126. I fell in love with the game of golf, and I gained a lifelong friend. We played over 15 times that summer, but Pete, being Pete, wanted to wager a Coke and a dog every game. Coke was 10 cents, dog 15 cents. Over those 15 games, Pete shot anywhere between 104 and 110. I shot between 112 and 123, so that's right. Pete won every match. He won every Coke, every hot dog. The next year, our first match, Pete shot 105. I shot 91. I headed straight to the lunch counter to get my Coke and my dog. No Pete. I'm looking around, and he's outside in the parking lot waving to me frantically. We had to get home. He took me to his granny's, where she made me a hot dog and poured me some lemonade. I'm not happy about that. Over a year of losing, and now my time comes for my reward. But Pete says, a dog's a dog, man. Works for me. Peter and I spent the next 7 to 8 years together as friends. All summer at Grand Beach, we worked at the grocery store, drugstore, hot dog stand on the boardwalk, the fish and chips restaurant. Needless to say, I had a lot of hot dogs for lunch that summer, and he had a lot of fish and chips. Now, Granny, she has a very strict rule. She said no girls in the cottage when she wasn't there. Granny tended to forget to lock the back door. Music and jive for hours. Pete was a great dancer. He would have at least 6 girls lined up to dance with him every Friday and Saturday night. I'd only have 3. Pete could jive to a waltz and waltz to a jive. His turns were perfect. He never grazed a girl's bust. But not me, I couldn't get that part right. Slowly, as we approached our 20s, his banking and my sales career got in the way. But in 1965, we bumped into each other at the Bay. I was in town for the Canadian Amateur Trials, and he was on his way to the beach that Friday for the weekend. And he suggested that we get together for a golf game in Pine Falls. Well, we made it happen. We golfed that Saturday. And yes, he wanted to wager a beer and a dog. He said his game had not improved that much, and he convinced me that I should give him 36 strokes. So we played the game. Pete shot 104. I shot 69. 35 strokes. Pete was good at math. So I took him right home to my mom's cottage, where she made us a hot dog, and I poured him a beer. He said, "You never forgot, did you?" And I promptly said, "Pete, a dog's a dog. Works for me." Bob goes on to say, "Life is made up of a series of events, people, and places. These define our lives by becoming pieces, segments, and sections. When all of this comes together, it describes our whole life. Peter Carnegie, I thank you for being a piece of my life, and vice versa. You made yourself a proud friend, a proud father, grandfather, and a loyal husband. By the way, you know what works for me now? Filet mignon, fine wine, and no strokes. Your friend in grace and honor, you will surely be missed, Bob Laidlaw." That's fantastic. You know, someone who's been a friend of Peter's since he was 9 years old took the time to connect with us. And I want to thank his younger brother, Gary Laidlaw, for actually arranging that discussion that we could have. And I was having a lot of discussions with a lot of people all week, and so that story certainly stood out to me. Now I'd like to ask Norm Oakley, one of Peter's many favorite dear friends, to share a chapter in Peter's remarkable life. Norm?
Thank you, Glenn. As Glenn mentioned, my name is Norm Oakley, and I knew Peter for some 50-plus years. I was asked to share a few words about my memories of Peter with you, and I'm honored to do that. First off, Peter falling asleep after dinner. Way back when, and probably decades ago, in one of our earlier dinners together with Peter and Marlene, which Marlene was cooking, and as usual, a most delicious meal with copious amount of food and all very well tasting. Peter and I retired to the couch after the meal. We chatted a while on some innocuous topic. I'm not sure what it was. And I asked Pete what he thought of what I was saying, what I had to say. Dead silence. No response. I thought to myself, I think he's asleep. Good grief, he is asleep. Marlene, I called out. I was talking to Peter, and he's fallen asleep on me. "Oh," Marlene replied, with that cute grin and a little laugh that she has. "Oh, don't worry about that. That often happens. You'll get used to it," she said. And so, over the years, I got used to it, as did many other people. Ladders. Yes, ladders. I know that's a sort of a strange topic, but ladders it is. It seemed to me there was some kind of an almost symbiotic relationship between Peter and ladders, and it was a special kind of relationship at that. It seemed Peter loved ladders. When he was younger, in his earlier days, when he saw a ladder, he would smile and his eyes would light up. But I'm not so sure ladders loved Peter. He would start to climb up. He'd get halfway up and the ladder would start to shake. Peter would start to shake. He'd go up a few more rungs. The ladder would shake even more. Peter would shake even more. And in the end, I was never too sure what or who was shaking the most, Peter or the ladder. And it was quite a sight to see. Of course, I would always go over and lend a hand and stabilize the ladder for him, but it was something to see when he first went up. However, after a few scrapes and near disasters, Peter learned to listen to Marlene from our backyard, who could often be heard shouting, "Peter, get down from that darn ladder before you kill yourself." And so finally, with a cease and desist order from Marlene, Peter's ladder climbing days came to an end. All the better for him. Thirdly, blueberry picking. Okay, so this is not the infamous Peter lost in the woods episodic event. Peter was a great blueberry picker, and he had what he called his special places, his secret places to pick. They were special, all right. He would occasionally or reluctantly share these places with us, but only after he had picked them clean. We would come back from these special places virtually empty-handed and say, "What the heck, Pete? What's going on? There's no blueberries there." And he would have a good laugh saying, "Well, the bears must have got there right after me." Of course, we all knew what really happened. Peter could pick a pail full of blueberries in half the time it took us. And he was what you would call a clean blueberry picker. No leaves, no branches. And when his pail was full, it was like, "Okay, I'm done, let's go home now." We were always in awe of his blueberry picking capabilities. So just a couple of really quick points, other points about Pete. Key lime pie, his all-time favorite. In our years together, our many years together in Florida, it was his go-to dessert. And he was always so appreciative when someone at the lake would make a blueberry pie for him, or a lime pie for him. Pete's love for Wincha. For those of you who may not know, Wincha was Pete's term of endearment for Marlene. In their old cottage, there were spiders. If you have a cottage, you have spiders. And in the bedroom of their cottage, Pete would sleep on the side closest to the wall. And he would sleep on the side closest to the wall because, you see, spiders stay close to the wall. And this was Pete's way of keeping spiders away from his beloved Wincha. Like, how sweet is that? His cottage yard, always meticulous. If a leaf fell on his freshly cut grass, man, that was war. He was on it immediately. "Gotta keep the yard clean," he would say. And lastly, reliability. I can tell you from personal experience, as chair of a committee or in charge of other things, you could always rely on Peter to do the job. In fact, when he took something on, he would go above and beyond the call of duty, and oftentimes at great personal sacrifice. He would not let you down, period. He had the heart of a lion even when fighting the dreaded black monster. His willingness to see things through during that time and his positivity were amazing. He was a man of integrity. He was a man of good conscience. People come and people go. Some you remember, some you forget. But for many of us here, Peter will always be with us. Goodbye, Pete. You were a good person. You were a good friend. And folks, if you believe in angels, I'm sure the angels came down from heaven and carried his soul gently to heaven.
Thank you, Norm. That was incredible. Thank you. I don't have a clue what grip blueberries had on Peter. He loved blueberries. In fact, his last meal that he could get down, the way cancer goes, you lose your appetite and all that stuff. His last meal was a small bowl of vanilla ice cream covered in blueberries. So right to the end, blueberries had them. And of course, you cannot talk about Peter and blueberries, because many of his cottage friends likely remember on a hot, humid summer day a few number of years ago, Peter decided to jump on his bicycle and go blueberry picking all by himself one morning. Now, this is despite his friend Les saying, Pete, don't go by yourself. I can't go with you now, but I'll go with you tomorrow. Just wait till tomorrow. We'll go blueberry picking. And despite his wife saying, Peter, it's too hot. Don't go blueberry picking. Anyone knows Peter, once he's made up his mind, it's made up. He's going blueberry picking. So at 7 a.m. that fateful morning, he told Marlene, I'll be back in 2 hours. As Norm said, Peter could be relied upon. So when he didn't come back in 2 hours, Marlene was already worried because he said he'd be back in 2 hours. Why isn't he back? 3 hours go by. 4 hours go by. 5 hours. Well, a few people in this room probably remember jumping on your bikes and heading out trying to find Peter in the bush to see if they could locate where Peter had went, but of course all his picking spots were secret. 6 hours go by. Now the park rangers are involved. And of course the park rangers always know exactly what to say to help keep wives calm by saying, it's been a hot summer, Marlene, the bears are active, they're going after blueberries too. 7 hours go by. They're warming up the helicopter to go do the air search. When who should come riding up on his bike to the park office? The way I envision it is it's a squeaky bike, like squeak, 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 up to the park office, but Peter. And the lady in the park office said, Peter, we're looking for you. And only as Peter could say with a bit of a growl saying, you didn't find me. Tired, sweaty, and very thirsty. No worse for wear. He was back. Did he come back with blueberries? I never did hear the end of the story. He probably ate them all. I am now going to ask Peter's favorite daughter-in-law, and only daughter-in-law, to share a chapter in Peter's impactful life. Jamie.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Jamie Carnegie, and I've had the opportunity to know Peter for the last 32 years. The first 7 long years as his son's girlfriend, and the past 25 as really his favorite daughter-in-law. I wanted to share with you someday some of my reflections on Peter's life and some stories about how I knew him as a father, as a grandfather, but also as a colleague in Manitoba's public service. So I met Sean way back in the early 1990s when I was slim and blonde and Sean had brown hair. So just you need to envision it. Shortly after we began dating, I met Sean's family and spent a lot of time with the Carnegies at their home in Westwood on Pinehurst Crescent. As a young adult, it was interesting for me to see how another family, much like mine, operated. There were lots of similarities for sure. Meticulously maintained home and yard. You know, you couldn't walk in the living room. It just couldn't walk in there. And if you tried to cover up your tracks, Marlene knew. The yard, impeccable. We spent a lot of time eating dinner together, watching TV, sports, comedies, movies, all very similar. But that said, Peter was always an interesting character to me from the very beginning. Peter and I quickly found a common interest. I discovered that he was a fan of the TV series Beverly Hills 90210. This was a weekly hour-long drama following the lives of a group of friends attending Beverly Hills High. It was incredible to me that my boyfriend's father was as invested in the Dylan, Brenda, Kelly love triangle as I was. Peter further fascinated me with his dedication to getting a deal. I wasn't going to write cheap, Marlene, but Glenn said it first. Peter was cheap. Shannon used to work at Zellers, and using her staff discount for friends and family shopping nights at both Zellers and the Bay was a top priority. First off, Peter switched up his soda of choice from Cragmont from Safeway to Zeddy. Trust me, it was not like Coca-Cola or A&W root beer at all. The most fascinating part was choreographing the shopping trip to the Bay downtown, or even Unicity. It was a big undertaking. Do you go to menswear for the sale on sweaters first? Or do you risk missing out on the timed deal on watches at the jewelry counter? Critical decisions needed to be made. These trips were planned in great detail, and we all had our missions to maximize efficiency and savings both. The thing is, it was no surprise, because these sales happened in November, what you were getting for Christmas. Because he might have made you stand in the line to pay for the gift he and Marlene were going to give you for Christmas while he went on to the next deal. It happened. This commitment to organization was evident when we helped Peter and Marlene move to their condo in Charleswood shortly after Peter and I were married. I carried box after box of chronologically ordered boxes labeled pay stubs. Not a year worth, not 2 years worth, decades worth. Now that is dedication to being organized and record keeping. I asked Peter if they were necessary to move, and maybe we could just shred them or toss them, considering he hadn't worked for the Bank of Montreal for over 10 years by that point. He answered me by looking at me like I had two heads and directed me to put them in the van. So I did. Peter was also truly dedicated as a picky eater. If any of you have come across or had the chance to share a meal with Peter, you know this very well. The list of foods that were excluded from his diet or his preferences in preparation was very long. Too long to list here, because again, we would need to schedule a bio break for everybody. But here are some highlights. Peter only ate a salad if it was lettuce, tomato with salt and pepper, period. No dressing, no other vegetables. Fruit, nuts, or cheeses were allowed. Garlic, definitely a no-go. One time, many years ago, it was a birthday or anniversary dinner, Peter wanted to go to have lobster, so Sean and I took he and Marlene to Red Lobster. He wanted the biscuits, but without garlic butter. Do you know how long it takes to get biscuits without garlic butter in a chain restaurant where everything is automated and pre-made? Let's just say the bill came before we had his garlic-free biscuits. Onions. Oh, onions. Peter would not eat a dish if he could spot an onion. Full stop. His dedication to keeping onions out of his orbit was incredible. During one stay at Victoria Hospital this year, he thought he was very clever when he told the dietitian that he was actually allergic to onions. The dietitian dutifully recorded this information, so every day his menu that you get came with a big red stamp on it that said allergy in uppercase letters with the word onions written below. He was very proud of this big, bold red stamp on his papers. And it's no surprise to any of you that he showed it to Sean and I, or whoever was visiting, when they came to visit with great pride. He apparently has pulled this same trick during his stay at Riverview. The thing is, what was comical about it is the people whose cooking he loved, Mary Louise's, Marlene's, and I, all cook with onions. And over the last year, I would bring him some foods that I thought he would enjoy and he could possibly eat. He particularly loved the chicken noodle soup that I made him. He actually proclaimed it was the best chicken soup he ever had. But the thing is, it had a lot of onions in it, just well disguised. So I guess the joke was on him. As you've also heard, Peter was intense when he focused on something, pretty much whatever it was, be it his passionate hatred for onions and garlic in his food, or a sporting event on TV. When he and Sean would watch together, there would always be lots of shouting, colorful language, pure frustration or celebration, depending on what was happening on the play. This is something that Peter has passed on to his number one son. Sean's friends who are here, who attend Jets games with him, and the people in the seats around them can certainly attest to that. There's some very funny stories here for another day. Many of my remembrances of Peter highlight his quirky side. the parts that made him easy to tease, but also easy to love. One of the other parts of Peter that I came to know better in our relationship was that of him as a public servant. As you know, Peter had an unexpected career change at the age of 50 when he left the Bank of Montreal after almost 30 years. This happened shortly after Sean and I started dating, and I witnessed him working through this very difficult, stressful, and frankly, very devastating change in his life. He soon turned this setback into an opportunity and showed incredible resilience. There was a period of grief and anger, for sure, when he processed this change. But after a short while, he had a plan to rebuild and start over. As it turned out, his educational credentials were no longer recognized, requiring him to take a general equivalency for his grade 12 at 50. He did it. To get current work experience that was outside of banking, he began volunteering. He spent many hours in that basement office of his on Pinehurst Crescent, answering calls for the kids' help phone in his basement office. And Shannon and I are laughing because it was our favorite thing to tease him about at the time. Like, what advice could you possibly be giving these kids phoning you people? It was odd to us. So it was fodder for a lot of teasing at the time. I remember his excitement at the opportunity to join the public service in Manitoba through a volunteer program for people who needed to transition back into the workforce. This program saw him placed at the Office of the Public Trustee as a client administration officer. He soon became a permanent member of the public service and spent the remainder of his career as a dedicated and well-respected colleague. As an officer with the public trustee, Peter was tasked with managing the health, social, and financial affairs of those unable to do so for themselves. This often involved advocating for them with other government departments and programs like social services, the healthcare system, or with landlords or even their own family members. He did this keeping their rights, their needs, and their best interests of all his clients under his care at the forefront of his work. He was fair and respectful when advocating with other programs for his clients and really developed a stellar reputation around government. You might ask, how do I know this? Well, I began my own career with the public service in 2002 when Peter was still working. So as I progressed through different roles and different programs and departments, I continually came across people who would ask me, are you related to Peter Carnegie? And in Manitoba, you get asked these kinds of questions. Do you know, or are you related a lot? And you're ever unsure. Is this going to be a good connection? How do I answer? But it was always a good response. Each of those interactions with other people would end up with the person commenting on how terrific Peter was to work with, and a story about a client that they had together who he went above and beyond for. Even after his retirement, I got comments and requests for updates, and I still do, about how he is. His impact is felt to this day. One of the aspects of having a family member managing a terminal diagnosis and a battle with a disease like cancer, and particularly the kind of cancer Peter was fighting, is that it does trigger you to contemplate the ways this person has impacted your life, the things you were thankful that they brought to you. I had the opportunity to have some time one-on-one with Peter over the last month. We had some really good conversations. I'm so thankful for that time because we don't always get that chance, particularly when someone's in that type of a circumstance. I wanted to share that he was in a good place. He spoke of the good life that he had, full of lifelong friends and a rich family life, and with the Strobe clan and in his own immediate family. Lots of funny stories and memories to share. He spoke a lot about his time that he and Marlene spent in retirement, and of course his children, and his number one in-laws. But also he was so proud of these 3 intelligent and adventurous granddaughters of his who were on the path to creating amazing lives for themselves. So there are many things I'm thankful for Peter bringing into my life. But the best one is my love, my husband, Sean. He has so many of the same qualities that Peter has. Yelling at Jets games to the point of pure embarrassment where I want to leave. But he also has integrity, and he's fun-loving, and he has a terrific sense of humor and has been an incredible partner to me. But thank goodness he loves onions and garlic.
Thank you, Jamie. That was incredible. And you're right. Peter always showed great resolve and the ability to bounce back in the face of any challenge. As Norm pointed out, he'd also bounce back off the ground when he fell off a ladder. But that was Peter. Now, it gives me immense pleasure to ask Peter's 3 favorite granddaughters to come up and each share their fondest memory with their grandfather. Hannah, Megan, Ella.
Hello, my name is Hannah, and I'm Grandpa's favorite, oldest granddaughter. I gained Peter as a grandfather 21 years ago at 5 years old when my dad married Shannon. The thing I was most excited for with them getting married was that I would get a 3rd set of grandparents and a 3rd grandpa. Grandpas spoil you, and they let you eat more treats than your parents say you're allowed. So obviously I was ecstatic to have 3 when everyone else only got 2. Peter in particular also loved his sweets. Speaking of blueberries, which meant blueberry and chocolate chip pancakes with extra syrup every time I came over. Not only did I get extra birthday and Christmas presents, but I also got one more grandpa to give me extra flowers at my dance recitals and another person cheering me on at my swim meets and water polo games, where I always knew exactly where my family was because I could hear him cheering me on over the large crowds of people. I also got a beautiful cabin at Grand Beach that I got to go to every summer. I even got an extra person to embarrass me by accidentally telling my first crush I thought he was cute when he called out to me saying, "Hannah, the boy you think is really cute is here," not realizing the window was open and he could hear every word. As much as today is a loss, I can't help but be grateful for the things I've gained in my life having him as grandpa.
There we go. Hello, everyone. My name is Megan, and I am Grandpa's favorite middle and shortest granddaughter. So today I thought I would give you all a quick glimpse into the grandpa that I knew, going through kind of a typical beach day and some stories, some of my favorite memories. So mornings always started at the dinner table downstairs with his cup of coffee and the lid that he would place on top after each sip, and along with his toast and honey that were no crumbs were left untouched, and each individual piece was picked up with his finger every time he ate. The process of getting ready for a beach day followed soon after this. That included a fully packed cooler by Grandma with water and snacks, his big purple umbrella, beach chairs, beach toys for us, his favorite baseball hat, and his always very fashionable swim trunks. Grandpa was so fashionable with his bathing suits that he would wear them so high up on top of his stomach that for probably a very questionable amount of time, I didn't think he had a belly button. Once us grandkids got sufficiently sunburnt at the beach and our ever so popular grandpa visited with what seemed like every single person on the beach, we knew it was time to head home. So as we've mentioned, Grandpa was very picky about his food and probably lied about being allergic to onions many times, as you know. This rule, however, did not apply to us grandkids when it came to food. There was one night in particular I remember Grandma had bought us chocolate bars as a treat for dinner that night. But of course, we had forgotten them in the car, and they were very melted by the time it came to eating them. When Ella had tried to open up her chocolate bar, and it was sufficiently mushy and unable to open, Grandpa had decided to rip open the messy wrapper, start licking away some of the chocolate, I guess in an attempt to clean it up, and ended up eating about half of the chocolate bar, kind of put it back together, and then handed it back to Ella and said, "Here you go." Ella was not very happy. After dinner, the nights often ended with either a game of cards or Grandpa retreating to the loft to watch some of his many quality recorded programming, including America's Got Talent, So You Think You Can Dance, or Big Brother. Our grandpa was many wonderful things, and whether intentionally or not, you could always count on him to make you smile, which is one of the many reasons we loved him so much.
Hi everyone, I'm Ella, Grandpa's favorite youngest granddaughter. As we all know, Grandpa loved Grand Beach, and it's also one of my favorite places. Growing up, I would spend a few weeks every summer with Grandma and Grandpa out there. And each morning, Grandpa would wake up very early to make sure he had the best spot at the beach. And not just for him, but for all of his friends. Throughout the day, he would come swim with me. He'd pretend to eat my desserts that I made out of the wet sand. And he would slowly accumulate a semicircle of all of his friends. And they would laugh and talk until 5 p.m. before we'd head in for dinner and then play a very intense game of cards. I was only 9, but he was very competitive and he would not let me win, ever. But that made the few victories I did have throughout the years extra special. And I definitely became very competitive as I grew up. And this is how I'll always remember him. And when I was very young, when he'd live with us, every night before bed, we'd play a game of hide and go seek. And every night, I would be literally hiding under a table, and my feet would be out, and he would still pretend that he couldn't find me, and that it was an amazing hiding spot. And it's just really crazy how you never know you're doing something for the very last time. He was protective, firm, purposeful, warm, lovable, and gentle. Sure.
Grandpa was protective, firm, and purposeful, but also warm, lovable, and gentle. He was very particular about finishing all your milk and not wasting any food for dinner. But his number one rule was that you must always leave space for dessert. At the end of the day, Grandpa was his granddaughter's biggest cheerleader. He was always so proud of every accomplishment we had, no matter how big or small. We're all going to miss you, Grandpa. We love you. Great. Note to self, put grandchildren at the end. Wow, that was incredible. Thank you so much to all three of you. And I know it's not easy to speak in front of people, especially when they mean so much to you and that sort of thing, but Grandpa would be proud. Peter loved the Minnesota Vikings, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, the Winnipeg Jets. He rarely missed watching any game, and every Saturday, Sunday, he could be caught watching golf on TV. But as you've heard before, he also shamelessly loved keeping up with the love twist between Brenda and Dylan on Beverly Hills 90210. And was intrigued by the next sinister plot Amanda would have against Alice on Melrose Place. When you'd hear him yelling at the TV, you didn't know if it's because the Bombers fumbled the ball on the goal line or the wrong star was voted off Dancing with the Stars. He was just as intense. And Peter also, when I first met Peter, he had a catalog of VHS tapes, and each one was labeled. And he knew exactly what show was what show, and he never missed an episode of anything. He was a master of the VHS taping machine. And if anyone of Shannon's friends missed an episode of Beverly Hills or Melrose, don't worry, Peter had them covered. And as technology advanced, so did Peter. His recording addiction easily parlayed to the PVR. And like I said before, Peter lived with Shannon and I for a few weeks on each side of the season. And on multiple occasions, more than I could even count, I'd be getting anxious to watch the Jets game, I'd get my beer, my bag of chips, I'd plant myself on the TV, turn on the TV to all PVR channels are currently in use. Please try again later. Because Peter would be watching one show and taping 3 other ones. I don't know if there's any other people out there that could name the entire defensive line of the Minnesota Vikings and all the characters in Melrose Place, but Peter could. As Jamie said, and as Megan also implied, Peter was fussy about his food, so I won't tell you that story. But he also had a Kevlar tongue. He didn't like his food hot. He liked it piping hot. I sat with Peter, again, many Saturdays. I brew a fresh pot of coffee. It's freshly brewed, poured in his cup. He'd take one sip, put it in the microwave for 20 more seconds, because nearly boiling wasn't quite hot enough for Peter. And virtually every meal, you get halfway through, and his dinner plate would find its way into the microwave to heat it up again. And this included restaurants. He would track down the server many times saying, "You get this in the heat a little bit?" And I found that, and then, like Megan said, the little cover on his coffee just to make sure it stayed boiling was, I don't know how you could drink that stuff. And I wish I spoke to Peter more about his junior hockey days or just his youth in general. I was talking to Bob Laidlaw, and he shared a story about, Peter wasn't very tall, but he had no problem getting in the face of opposing players in hockey and with people that are much bigger than him. I've also learned over the last few days that Peter was not only an accomplished hockey player, but he was a well-rounded athlete. In high school, he played on the school's hockey, football, track, and basketball teams. That's not a typo. Yes, I said basketball. I've seen the pictures to prove it. I think there's one in the back there. He also golfed and curled. Now, the Peter I knew wore a tie and a sweater vest to work. I didn't know him as this amazing athlete, this well-rounded athlete. But I saw it firsthand one chilly morning in my garage. You see, Ella had just switched from ringette to hockey, and she could skate like the wind, but she could not break a pane of glass with her shot. So I took her in the garage, and I was showing Ella how to properly take a wrist shot. Peter happened to drive up and was coming home at that time. So he watched me flutter a few shots into the net as I showed Ella the perfect technique to take a wrist shot. And then Peter goes, "I play a little hockey." And of course, Ella goes, "Show me your shot, Grandpa." Well, even though Peter was right-handed, he shot left-handed, and all we had was right-handed sticks. That didn't bother Peter at all. He just grabbed the stick. Next thing I know, the puck fires top corner in the net. Less than a second later, the second puck hits the second top corner. Pucks were flying faster and harder than I'd ever seen pucks fly in a long time. He had shot 10 or 15 pucks in a matter of seconds, all tucked up in the top corner. And he just kind of looks at me with a bit of a smirk and goes, "Oof, chilly out here. I'm going in the house." And then he goes, and I think I just sat there like, what the? Now, I don't want to talk about cancer, but Peter's fight against it was legendary. It really was. And it's an important chapter in Peter's life. It's a big piece of his dash. He was first diagnosed with prostate cancer in 2012, which was a battle he won. He was then diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer in December of 2017. And that's when he and Marlene were actually in Florida when the diagnosis came in. His prognosis was not encouraging. The oncologist at that time told him he had 8 or maybe 11 months on the outside. I don't have a clue what impact that had on Peter, but what I do know is that he sprung immediately into action. He had to make sure that Marlene was going to be financially okay, his affairs were in order, the man was on a mission. He got busy. Even though traveling to Florida was no longer in the cards for them, they found a beautiful apartment to live in, and he made sure that I knew how to open and close the cottage. That was very important, that I could open and close the cottage, not wreck it. Because his diagnosis was in December, Christmas was right around the corner. But we had a fantastic and laugh-filled Christmas in 2017. It was fantastic. We had a year of birthdays, a year of anniversaries, all thinking it was our year of lasts. But we had another great Christmas in 2018. And lo and behold, Peter and Marlene joined Shannon, Ella, Hannah, and I in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico in 2019. And Peter actually was very nervous about going to Mexico because he read in the paper that there's drug cartels out there. And he was a little worried about going to Mexico because of that. But by day 2, he had already made fast friends with a couple from Minnesota. And he got into the all-inclusive resort mood pretty quick. And he had met this couple at the same time, in the same place, by the pool every day. And only as Peter could, he took full advantage of the all-inclusive breakfast, lunch, and dinner. By the time we got down for breakfast, he could tell us where the crispy bacon was and where the soggy bacon was, so we could avoid that. And I often called Peter the milk and cookie cowboy. I rarely ever saw him drink alcohol. And in Mexico, he may have taken a sip of a fully loaded margarita, but he certainly had his share of the virgin ones. And then in 2020, it's like everybody else, the rest of the planet, we had the COVID Christmas. Did the best we could, and it was quite good as well. And then in 2021, which turned out to be our final Christmas with Peter, we had the gift of another additional 4.5 years with this man that we didn't think we were to get. Despite his diagnosis, he remained pain-free and a good quality of life. And during that time, he added to all of our lives. Despite him being the one with cancer, he made sure that we would all be okay, and he did everything to make sure of that right to the end. The nurses at Cancer Care Manitoba told Peter routinely that he was a miracle, and they had never seen anyone with his diagnosis come in for as many chemo treatments as he has. One of his first doctors that he had after his diagnosis advised Peter. We had made a comment saying, Peter, you just have to be positive. And the doctor said, you know what? Cancer doesn't care about your attitude. I don't believe that for a second. I'm certain that it was his positivity and his dogged commitment to his treatments, the support of his friends and family, that helped him propel the extra 4.5 years. And if I can be so bold for a moment, and I'll just say, Sean, your dad was so proud of you. As much as he went on and on and on and on about the awards that you won at work, sometimes look at me and say, hey, big guy, where's all your awards? But he was prouder of the family and home that you made with Jamie and Megan. And raising such a brilliant and beautiful granddaughter for him. His granddaughters were for him. And Shannon, you're his princess and his pumpkin. Trust me, I know I had to go through the Peter gauntlet to get to you. He was so proud of you too. When you won your award at work, you would have thought you won the Nobel Peace Prize, the way he talked about it. I know you're going to miss the way he used to say to you. He used to call you and say, hey, Shan, it's Dad. Even though, of course, it's Dad. You know it's him. He'd always say that. And his greatest pride was how the home you built as well, how you embraced Hannah as a daughter, because he knew what it was like to be a child of the divorced parents, and also his first granddaughter. And then, of course, there's Ella, who we brought into his grandpa universe. I don't think I'm spilling any secrets here when I say, Sean, you were his favorite son. And Shannon, you were his favorite daughter. And Jamie, you had a very particular place in Peter's heart. And he thoroughly enjoyed your engaging conversations about genuine issues. I talk crap. She talked genuine issues. And he really appreciated, and just know that you brought him so much comfort with your visits at Riverview and Jocelyn House Hospice. And it's this connection that you had with Peter that made you the exact perfect person to write his obituary, which was amazing, by the way. Hannah, Megan, and Ella, words cannot describe the joy that you brought him. He loved seeing you succeed more than anything. He knew that you were beautiful, inside and out, smart, intelligent, kind, and you're all going to be successful young women. He was proud of whatever it is you accomplished and whenever you did it. Now, he only had 3 favorite granddaughters, and they were you 3. Hannah, he knew you were going to make a great teacher someday. And he absolutely wanted to be at your wedding in Victoria next year in person, but please know he'll be there in spirit. Megan, getting to Ivy School of Business at Western and being so brave to go there, leave home, and then getting to a prestigious internship at Labatt's. Man, was he proud too. I had many times sitting with Peter, and that was the story he would often say. And Ella, he loved the fact that you're going to Asper School of Business and embarking on your own adventure in distance education in Zurich, Switzerland next year. I'm very proud of you as well. And he also enjoyed counting your tip money from your bartending job with a smile on his face, as only as a grandpa and a banker could. That man could snap a $20 bill like anybody. And Marlene. Peter was desperately head over heels in love with you. You were his wincha for more than 52 years. You challenged each other in ways that raised 2 phenomenal children, who have now gone on to raise 3 phenomenal children. You shared so much, the highs, the lows, and then the highs again. Multiple moves that resulted in lifelong experiences and lifelong friendships. Lots of travel, cruises, Hawaii, Vegas, Palm Springs, Mexico, multiple road trips. We won't even talk about the motorhome and the whole sewage thing. That's a whole different story. Successful children. You raised successful children. Beautiful cottage surrounded by incredible friends. Wintering in Florida for 12 years. And of course, 3 beautiful granddaughters. He thought the world of you, and he appreciated all the sacrifices you made to make sure that he got to all 3 of his appointments at cancer care every week for the last 4 years. And of course, this last scare in July, when you unfortunately fell and broke your arm, and you yourself were hospitalized for 2 weeks. Despite the daily visits from the rest of us, Sean, Jamie, Shannon, the grandchildren, and the big guy here, his thoughts were of you in your hospital bed in Concordia. He felt terrible about what had happened, and he longed to see you again, which of course he did. We just had our year of lasts with Peter, including his last visit to the cottage in Grand Beach on July 29th. He was so looking forward to that visit that he got up, and he usually didn't get dressed, he usually stayed in his pajamas at Riverview, but he got up and got dressed and ready to go, and called Shannon early in the morning just to make sure we were still coming. Hi, Shannon's dad. Are you still coming? And those that were there, it was a beautiful day. Oh my God, probably the best day of the summer. I'm sure that time there added to his life. Maybe not days, but certainly quality. He hadn't ate for a full meal for quite some time, but on that day, we got him a children's meal from Tony Roma's of ribs, and he ate almost the whole thing. And I want to thank Colin and Glenda McDonald specifically for the use of their front deck. And please know that seeing all of you at that beach that day meant the world to him. And Colin, Peter still wants me to pay you back for all the beers you handed out that day. So next time I come over, I won't be empty-handed, and we'll raise a glass to Peter. A nurse at Jocelyn House said to us that after Peter passed away, even though he had not been there a long time, he left an impression there with his kind demeanor and his great smile. She also shared with Shannon a discussion that she had had with Peter. They were talking about life, and at Jocelyn House Hospice, they certainly don't shy away from those types of discussion with the patients because that's the stage of life they're in, and it's a great facility. And they're talking about life, and she asked him, what do you think you'll miss the most? And Peter said with no hesitation, and in this order, my family and Grand Beach. This nurse actually shed some tears when Peter passed away. She apologized profusely, saying that was so unprofessional of her. But of course, we embraced this because that was the impact that Peter had on other people. he formed relationships. I just want to share that during Peter's last days, family was always there. We were constantly visiting, as did a few friends. He was constantly surrounded by those who loved him. His daughter Shannon stayed with him for the last 48 hours so that he knew that he would never be alone. He passed away peacefully at exactly 7:18 p.m. on August 18th, with love in his heart. He made sure to wait until Sean got back from his golf trip, Hannah was in town, Wincha was released from the hospital, before he thought it was time to say goodbye. Don't underestimate how organized Peter was, and well thought out things were. On a personal note, Peter looked up to me because I was about a foot taller than he was. But I looked up to him because he was a wise, wise man. There was seemingly nothing that he didn't at least know something about. Even though he didn't really see me as pumpkin worthy initially, what it did is it did light a fire in me to always be better and strive to be better so that maybe someday I would be pumpkin worthy. And I thank him for that challenge. And I'm a better man for meeting him. I also think that he liked the fact that I could do all the ladder work at the cottage safely. That was big for him as well. When I got there, I don't think I saw him on a ladder again. He had so much room in his heart. He cared so much, and he took immense pride in absolutely everything that he did. I learned a lot from Pistol Pete. How to be a father, how to be a husband, how to be a friend. And yes, Peter, it also includes opening and closing the cottage, because you dragged me out there 3 years in a row to make sure I understood. I will embrace your detailed step-by-step clipboard of instructions, and I will miss Peter. He was not going to rest until he knew that Marlene and his family are going to be okay. So now, Peter, you can take it from the big guy. You've prepared us all well, and you can definitely rest in peace. I want to thank you all for coming today to celebrate Peter. I want to thank the Caboto Centre for allowing us to use their facility and the fabulous hospitality. You've been great to work with. I, of course, want to thank Richard Rosen, the funeral director, for helping us plan and organize this celebration. Richard is, like he said, another person, another example of someone who Peter met through work. Peter formed a relationship, then a friendship, and it's been great working with you, Richard, throughout this planning. Your care for Peter has been very evident. Peter's life is remarkable and impactful. We do not have enough time to sit here with words and tell you the story. The family has compiled some of their favorite pictures and clips, and our daughter Ella has put together a memory slide presentation that we think encapsulates Peter's life perfectly, has many life chapters, and provides greater context to the quality of his dash. When the presentation ends, Richard will say a few more words to conclude the formal part of Peter's celebration, and we encourage you to all to partake in refreshments and continue sharing your memories of Peter. I do want to let you know, though, that at the very end of the presentation, it shows a video clip of Christmas 2017. That was the Christmas following his diagnosis. And it shows his competitive nature and his ability to laugh at himself. And I hope you enjoy it as much as we enjoyed reminiscing while putting it together. Thank you for coming.
He needs some words.
Yeah. Okay, ready? Here, I'll hold your other one. Ready? Go.
A wise man.
A wise man.
A wise man.
A wise
Dated a man named me.
A wise man dated a man named.
A wise man.
A blind man
Dated
dated a man
with a man
named
Neat.
Neat.
Police
A police
search
search
for red
for
light riding riot.
A police
Police search
search
for
for
right
right
blank riding
robbing
riot.
riots
Riot.
All right, you're done.
Leslie.
literally. And easily.
Time up.
Oh, brother.
What was it?
Messy mummies bathe frequently.
They asked me to put one of those in and finish what I was going to say, but I absolutely refused. As Glenn had mentioned, and a bit of what Jamie had mentioned, I've known Peter when he first started at the Public Trustee's office after that undignified leaving from the Bank of Montreal. And the picture that had been up there of him sitting with his hands crossed, when I'd seen it just the other day when they told me that's the picture for the obit, that was what I had envisioned when he would phone, when I'd speak to him, because it was always the same, even from day 1 to year 5 to year 10 in our time together. Richard, this is Peter Carnegie from the Public Trustee's office. How are you today? And that's all I could envision. But what I got from that, and what Jamie had alluded to, was he was a strong advocate for the clients under his care. And my role with him was to ensure the final dignity for those clients under circumstances sometimes where dignity was elusive to some of these folks. So in his tone of voice, and that's been alluded to about his zeal and the way he portrayed, and he didn't have to tell me how important it was to do my job really, really well, because his tone of voice told me that. There was a precision in everything he did, and again, that was alluded to. So in closing, I just wanted to say that. Two things. I've been doing this almost 40 years. And there's 30 funeral companies in Winnipeg. We're the most heavily saturated market in the country for the size of city we are. Edmonton's got 14. We got 30 for a lot of reasons. And Peter knew that I had left where I was after 30 some odd years. He knew every funeral director in the city of Winnipeg. He dealt with all of us. And to have that phone call earlier this year, and it was the same thing. Yes, Richard, this is Peter Carnegie calling. And again, now I can picture that. envision that photo. But 30 funeral companies and a long career, and I'm starting up a brand new funeral company. I opened in January 2018, and he picked me because of this rapport and a long-time friendship. And I say this because I'm grateful. As a small business owner, as a new business owner, regardless of my career and what I've been doing, to have someone like Peter to reach out to someone like me and to say, I trust you and I know you, it means the world to me. And I am so grateful to that relationship, to the friendship that I'd been able to build with him, and to get to know him and to work with him under difficult circumstance. So I thank Peter for that trust and faith in me. And to close, on behalf of all of us in the funeral industry that had the opportunity to work with Peter under these difficult circumstances, we are very grateful. And to the family for letting him do what he did so well, because from what I heard today, all of you are part of who he was. We got a particular type of Peter that could never be replaced or duplicated because of who he was and the impact that all of you had on his life that made him so very good at everything that he did. So with that, I thank you very much for coming. Oh, and Peter, thanks for letting us win the game yesterday. It was a squeaker.